All right. So the one group that has been left out of the conversation so far is probably the most important group. It's the growers themselves. Like I said, they're the end users of that. So we're about to change that, and we're really excited that, as we all know, that growers love to listen to their radio, and one of our favorite DJs is Erick Johnson with Farm Talk. So Erick, I'm going to invite you up on the stage here to moderate this next panel with a bunch of innovative growers.
Hello. Thank you for having me here. Again, that's my wonderful face for radio. That's why I'm not on television. And we've got some great growers from around the region, and I don't know why they're not up here already. I guess we could introduce them as they're coming up here. Our starting lineup coming up here first is Shaye Wanner from the Wishick area. Good to see you. There we go. And getting the traveling the furthest award and still awake, 8 cups of coffee later, Loran Steinlage. Did I get the name right? And last but not least, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I'm going to be interviewing her more often. I haven't had a chance to talk to her before, but Noreen Thomas of Doubting Thomas Farms right here in the Moorhead area. So here they are, your growers. You guys can go ahead and grab a seat. And again, we're going to be talking about innovation basically as a whole. But first of all, we want to do, and coming into this, I hadn't had a chance to talk to any of these three before. But last night I got a chance, and the great thing is that each one of these basically have a little bit of a digital footprint online. So they either have a website or they have YouTube stories about them. And I'll be honest with you, I will not be able to do justice in the panel to talk about everything that these folks have going on in 30 minutes. But we got to get you to lunch on time. So we're going to do our best. But we're going to go across here, let them do an introduction first, and then tell you the reasons why they've been brought here today. So Noreen, you can go ahead for a minute or two, tell folks what you're all about.
Okay. So I'm Noreen Thomas. I don't think it's working. I'll give it back.
I'll hold this one.
I'm Noreen Thomas. Doubting Thomas Farms, we're about 15 minutes away. We are a 6th-generation farm, and we are growing organic crops for Japan. We also sell to chefs across the world. So we really like, our hallmark is flavor. Some of the old-time grains actually are flavor. So my background's in sensory evaluation as well as nutrition. So the things that I really wanted to see is 1, flavor. 2 is that it's nutrient dense because we're feeding babies, we're feeding families. And we found just by going to NDSU, doing some antioxidant, that we are 400% more than any product on this, in the store, in the shelf. And it just got me thinking more and more. So sometimes the grains that we grow aren't the high producers. They're not the big rollers. But we can capture that market, maybe with flavor and what's actually in our ingredients. So I also am a mentor. There's 6 other farms. Women are returning to the farm in droves, by the way. There's women under 36 farms. There are 6 farms I work with, and because women are communicative, I have sons. I'm very supportive of men. And my sons as well. But the women kept calling me. So what we did is we just have a collaboration. We're just ragtag. But the women have been able to get 7 times the price in the elevator, so I can sustain them and help them. We also do education. We have 8,000 people through our farm in 5 years because I like people. My husband hides in the Quonset, but we have a great time.
All right. Am I on? Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased to be on a panel with these great individuals. So my name is Shaye Wanner, and I'm the host of the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast, and I think that's how most people know me. It'll be 5 years of podcasting in August, but really my background lies in the cattle industry, and I know most of you are farmers, but some of you have to have cattle, right? Maybe a few? Okay. So I grew up on a seed stock operation with a few commercial cattle as well, and so that's where my background lies. And currently today, my husband and I farm and ranch north of Wishick, North Dakota. So I like the commercial cow-calf side of things, and I have my podcast. I like the cattle, and he likes the crops. So we predominantly farm, actually, and then Philip and his dad have an independent crop consulting business as well. So that's a little bit about my background, but really the reason I started the podcast and what I'm most passionate about is creating conversations, hence the name Casual Cattle Conversations, between rancher to rancher, farmer to farmer, industry experts and ranchers. So whether it's my podcast or my monthly mastermind events known as Rancher Minds, that's really what I like to do. I really like to facilitate conversations and connect cattlemen and women to the people who are going to help sharpen their mindset and connect them to new ideas to be more profitable and pass down land that can be used for generations to come.
I'm Loran Steinlage, West Union, Iowa. I always struggled introducing myself, but I finally figured out probably the best way to introduce myself is a curious mind that can't say no. And it's got me in a lot of unique situations over the years. Got to travel the world, see a lot of innovative farmers. Doesn't really hit you home until they start calling you an innovator. We won several environmental leadership awards over the years, including the No-Till Farmer Innovator of the Year 2020, 2023 Leopold Award, which is a real big compliment to me because I first heard about the Leopold Award here in North Dakota. But the history of our farm is we started out as a heavy livestock row crop operation, and through the years, it got to the point where I can't be around livestock anymore, so we had to innovate our way into strictly a row crop operation. And to do that, I started building a lot of equipment. And then to support my iron bending habit, I started adapting and learning how to employ diversity into our cropping operations. And now on annual, we probably produce up to 7 different crops, including the open pollinating corn, the heritage crops and stuff like that. We got 3 different varieties of wheat, working with beer and stuff like that. So.
Fantastic. By the way, I just want to say this for folks, if you're not familiar with the Leopold Conservation Award, and they have given it out in North Dakota, it's a big deal. Congratulations. 2023 Iowa's Leopold winner. That is a huge deal. Give him a round of applause, please, because that isn't just as simple as doing 1 or 2 simple things on your farm. That's really trying to give back and conserve and do what you can. We're just going to go down the line and just kind of start drilling down in some of the statements that each of our 3 panelists said. Again, I could sit here for another hour, but we'll try to go through as quickly as we can. And Noreen, I guess we'll start with you first. And if you could, just give us a couple of minutes, and obviously this is an innovation panel. Talk about just maybe a few of the things on your operation over the years where innovation has played a role.
Yeah. We started out, actually, when the satellite images came out with NASA, we had a grant. And so NASA had a big thing on there, and they said, we'll give you the technology if you promise to give us feedback. And so I did. And we were finding all sorts of fun things, and the neighbors got a little paranoid. But I said, just wear your shirt when you're out there in the field. I don't want to see that. So we have been on the edge of that. We have 2 research projects right now because I love it. One is we're doing 350,000 tons of compost a year. And I figured out that if I could add, there's a lot of talk about microbes, that if I could add certain microbes, that I could increase that pile, I could make that compost, because we're using it for fertilizer and inputs, because we saw the rising costs from China and Russia, the fertilizer. I don't want that stuff on the land. The other one is that we're doing research on grains and growing mushrooms. And the company we worked with was started in their basement, and they're at $2 million right now. So we're tinkering with that too. The other thing, we are growing perennial flax, perennial sunflowers on the farm. So you plant it once, and it's tough as nails. It went through drought, it went through flooding, it's still there. And that was taken from the mountaintops in Utah and western North Dakota, the perennial flax. It's always been there. And that's under Dr. Brent Hauge. It's a lot of fun. The sunflowers come back every year, 6-7 feet tall. It shouldn't work at all, but it's working, so it's fun.
So I really get a unique position where I get to talk not only about what my husband and I and my parents do on those two separate operations on the innovative side, but on the podcast side and with my rancher minds, I get to see what a lot of other diversified operators and ranchers are doing. And really the biggest thing that stands out to me and is really going to be the future is genetics, especially on the cattle side. Our ability to take DNA samples and determine which heifers are going to be the best replacements, to even potentially determine how long it's going to take to feed out a steer so that feedlot knows, that is really powerful from the profitability side, but especially from the resource side, to be able to look at that sample and say, you know what, actually these cattle fit better in my environment, and these I can sell to fit better in another environment. And I think that just goes back to the sustainability conversation, to about the conversation of transition planning and keeping our land in the family for generations to come. And so that's something that we do and I'm really excited about. If my husband were here up with me, he could talk a lot more on the crop side as far as the precision side, but like I said, that's not my expertise area, but definitely on the cattle side, it's genetics.
One of the fun parts of where I'm at in the world these days is, I think it was about 2019, I agreed to do a deal in Indiana. I thought I was going to do a speaking engagement, and I agreed to be a judge for Ag Lunch, some of you guys have heard about, and that's opened the door for me a lot to work with a lot of startups and that you guys have heard about today. And it's one thing to innovate on your farm, but it's actually another thing when you have these companies start showing up on your farm and you see them get that aha moment of working with a farmer. And that's been a big part of my focus the last several years. I told you some earlier, you know, I'm in that transition phase of life now. My daughters are actually taking over the farm. I'm stepping out of the way and let them manage, and I have the ability to help other farmers. That's where the innovation really starts in my mind.
Expand a little bit, and Loran, I know you've got, we could be here for a while because you've got a lot of things that are circulating in your world, but I want to talk a little bit about, and this definitely is in the innovation category, one of your, I believe it's your son, is facing a tough health challenge, and you had to do some innovative practices on your farm so you could just have more family time to do the things, whether it's to be around your son or do medical trips or whatever it happens to be. And it's not just small things. You innovated and definitely created some new pieces of equipment.
I tell everybody when I'm under stress, I build. That's probably the best way to describe it. And 2009, my son was diagnosed with pineoblastoma, had a 20% chance of living. And I woke up one morning saying my farm could die with me. And before that, I was a very closed-minded person. I didn't share a lot what we did because we were building an empire at that point. Well, you take that away from a guy, and I started learning the value of sharing and learning and understanding. And through some of that, we started a kids program, and that's when you start seeing them aha moments, as I mentioned. But the cropping system, stuff like that, is where we really started excelling. We pioneered interseeding in corn. We started that in 2006. Through the transition of that, we started to learn what relay cropping and companion cropping and that is, and all that was the ability to build the equipment to do it. But now we've come full circle. We've actually got universities and equipment companies starting to look into how to do this stuff. And
let's go back to you, Noreen. I'll give you the microphone in here in just a second. But back in 1997, you guys transformed into an organic farm, correct? Are you all organic at that time? Talk about that move, and then just talk about, if you would, just why you wanted to get into like the food grade grains and actually taking on some of that yourself instead of just selling it to a company. I mean, you guys, as you mentioned, you're selling directly to folks, you're selling to chefs, you're selling directly to businesses. Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, because we saw at one point, with the farms, either get bigger, get out, or go niche. So that was a decision we made. I was kind of more on board with it. It took some dragging to get us to the point. Our trading partners, Japan, Germany, things like that, it allowed us to pivot and really work with them close. I think working with chefs is that I'm always looking at flavor and what it does for families. I can't stop. So before it's planted, we pick out varieties that we find taste good. One, for instance, buckwheat. I did 300 people in Minneapolis, and what I found is that the Asians were much more sensitive to buckwheat varieties than we are, because we're not used to eating buckwheat. So we're going to plant buckwheat for a chef from New York. He's very famous, and grow it for his restaurant. So for us, it's able to provide that niche and keep the family farm. Our neighbors are not, but there's only 2% of us farmers left. We really have to stick together. It's not me against you. It's we have to work together, because there's some crossover of things that work in both systems. I enjoy working with the chefs. It's that creative part of me. I'm always mixing things. I'm always what ifs. I can't stop. I actually worked for General Mills before as a food chemist, so I can't. That's just part. So with daughter-in-law taking over the farm, she's, daughter-in-law. It's not our biological kids. She gets it. And so we're planting some really fun varieties. She's on board with it because she knows it's market share.
Okay, so I got a different question for you. She's the podcaster. Shaye, if I fall over right now, Shaye could pick up the microphone and completely do a great job. And you've been podcasting for about 5 years. You're relatively young, and I won't give your age. You told me it earlier, but you've been doing your podcasting business for a while. And with that, you've been interviewing basically ranchers. Is that fair to say, or are you crossing all over the board when you're talking to agricultural folk?
So I primarily interview people in the beef cattle industry. It started with a lot of rancher interviews, but since it has expanded to ranchers, feedlots, AgTech companies, really anyone who can help foster and create that conversation to improve ranchers' businesses and lifestyles.
Okay, and when I kind of leapfrog off of that, you have something on there. I got a chance to look at your website again. That's Casual Cattle Conversations, the website, and also the podcast. And you'll find the podcast there and other locations. But you have something called the Rancher Mind program. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yes, so Rancher Minds is a mastermind program for ranchers. And if you're not familiar with what mastermind programs are, think of them about fireside chats, roundtable conversations, Q&A calls. These are not monthly webinars. They are monthly conversations between 1 to 3 topic experts and cattle producers or ranchers. There's a variety of members that I have. And the reason I started this was for a couple of reasons. I was doing it with my business coach, and I saw how valuable it was for me, and I saw no reason why it couldn't be equally as valuable to those in the beef cattle industry. And also, I had podcast listeners who were saying, well, if you interview someone about this topic, I'd like to hear about this question. And you know what? Why shouldn't ranchers be able to just ask their own questions, ask the questions that matter most to them? So that's why I started it, and it's been really fun to see how, whether it's on a specific topic call or a freestyle call where there is no topic and we all just hop on the Zoom call and talk about what challenges we're facing or just check in with one another. We're really, like Loran said earlier, iron sharpens iron. This was in a different conversation, but it's been really fun to see how these ranchers and these experts are willing to share absolutely anything with each other, collaborate, learn from one another, and really dive deep into their operations to make those improvements.
I have not found this to be true. Maybe back in the 70s and 80s, but when you interview growers or ranchers, they're not the most talkative folks. But I think that's changing, especially if they trust you. Did you have any issues with that early on when you were trying to do your podcast? Or do you find that maybe people knew you and it was easier for them to talk? Or are they just chatterboxes now?
Well, as podcasts have become more popular, people have been a lot more open to being on podcasts, especially if you remind them that they have the opportunity to listen to the podcast before it goes live, read the article before it gets published, just to make sure everything's accurate there. Right away, the first interview I had was actually with my dad, because I started when I was 19 and I was scared and didn't know who to talk to, so I talked with my dad, and he didn't really even know what a podcast was. But since then, it's really grown. People understand what podcasts are, and if it's someone maybe a little bit who's maybe more in their 70s or 80s, they're maybe a little more hesitant, but boy, by the time we get off of that first phone call where I explain how everything's gonna go, they'll say, well, I don't have anything to talk about. I'm like, no, you just tell me everything you just told me about your operation. It's just a conversation where you're being open and honest. And at the end of it, they have a lot of fun, because what more of an honor than to be asked to share your story because it can help others.
And it's also giving you a great opportunity to get the word out, though. I asked you earlier, and I don't know if you had a definite number. Maybe you weren't prepared for me to ask this question, but you got quite a few subscribers. This isn't just like, your cousins and your relatives. You've got thousands of people that subscribe, and that message that you do weekly is getting out there.
Yeah, it's been very humbling to see the amount of people who subscribe to something that kind of even started as just a continuing education for me, if anything. And it's been an honor. It's really fun to run into random people at different conventions who say, oh, you're Shaye, you have cattle convos, you have the podcast, and they act like they know me, and it's really cool, but
yeah.
Can you introduce yourself too? But it's very humbling and very fun.
Has anybody asked for an autograph yet?
No, and I'm okay with that.
It's coming. It's coming. All right, Loran, back to you. You kind of raced by a few things, and I want to bring you back. Talk a little bit more about relay cropping. Maybe more folks in the crowd understand what that exactly is, but that's quite a process. I watched the video of you guys working with the field and putting that together. Talk about why you even gave the thought of trying to engineer relay cropping and where the idea came from, and are you still employing that today?
The relay cropping is the act of, we started out learning how to plant cereal crop in the fall. Traditionally it would be a cover crop, but we learned to turn our cover crops into cash crops. So to do that, we plant all our cover crops in twin rows in the fall, and then we come in and plant a 30-inch crop in between in the spring, like when we would normally plant soybeans or something like that. Where it gets challenging is then we will carry the cereal crop into July. We'll harvest the cereal crop without harming the soybean or something like that underneath. Where I see this going in the future is I've actually learned a lot of what we are doing from friends in Saskatchewan or North Dakota. So we can take that it's too far north conversation out of the context here. But I start seeing the vision where we will probably be growing 4 to 5 different crops at a time, and then learning how to separate them back out. The reason we do all this is in my neighborhood, cash rent is set by corn. And I'm in a $400 an acre cash rent market. So everything we do on our farm has to cash flow with the corn price. When we start learning to maximize with the multi-cropping and that, we can match the cash flow of I would say easily a 250, if not a 300 bushel corn crop right now. So it starts evolving and bringing it full circle. But one thing I want to back up on is what Noreen was talking about, the chefs and stuff like that. That's the place where I see us farmers willing to step out of our box a little bit and open the line of communication. That's where we can really start emphasizing what we have the potential to do and to bring it full circle to why we're here today, working with these startups and stuff like that. That's, I'm starting to realize myself how much power we as farmers have, and we can help do way better things than we ever thought we were capable of.
We have just a few minutes left here, so I just want to go down the line here just one more time and give everybody a chance to kind of do a wrap. But I have to ask Noreen again, Doubting Thomas Farms, greatest name ever. Love that name for the farm. But you have a big event coming up on September 14th. What is it?
One of the things we do with the farm is really open it up for people to come out and families. So you bring grandma with, you bring the little kids with. September 14th, we're also going to welcome our new neighbors. They may not look like us, but they're new farmers to the area. And we're going to have llamas, miniature donkeys. We're going to have a barrel train for kids. We're going to have Beth Dooley come from Minneapolis to do some demonstrations and a new book. We fill real quickly, so follow us on the line on Instagram and Facebook, Doubting Thomas Farms. And sometime come see us. I think it would be really fun. It is like going back to Grandma and Grandpa's farm, and you feel that sense of belonging. We do garden with kids from the homeless shelter just because I want to do that. And so if you ever have extra tools, send them our way, because we have no budget. We just run by the seat of our pants, honestly. But you're welcome anytime. We'd love to see you.
All right, Shaye, what do we miss for you? Anything else that we should ask you about, or anything in the innovation category that we missed?
You know, I just think when we think about innovation, it starts with collaboration and conversations, just like we're doing here today. So continue having those conversations at lunch with the person beside you. Don't be afraid to ever ask a question, and remember, you can learn something from everyone. If you're curious about more that what I do, or any people that I've had on the show, or just want to chat more, you can find me by searching for Casual Cattle Conversations online. If you search that, you'll pull up my podcast as well as my website, and I'm on social media as well.
So we get to Loran. FLOLOfarms is the name of your farm. Where does FLOLO come from?
That would be the first 3 letters off of my dad's name and the first 2 off of my name. The partnership began when I was 16. I became a full business partner in the farm, and I always tell everybody I had that traditional relationship with the dad that you had before that, but once we became business partners, it's been the best business partner I could ever ask for.
And one final question, where or who instilled in you, obviously being the Leopold Conservation Award winner for Iowa, the reigning position right now, where did it get drilled in your head to be a person to farm, you know, obviously with conservation in mind?
I would probably say it's hereditary. I mean, I would call my dad the innovator, but it didn't really hit me until I got to go to the home farm in Germany, that some of this stuff is ingrained way before we can even fathom it, because you go to the home farm in Germany and it was like we were at my place. And it was just pretty cool. You know, you're what, a 5th generation farmer? I don't know what generation farmer I am, but I know it's ingrained in us, and look forward to the future.
Absolutely. And Noreen, you're 6th generation, right? That's where you're at. One thing, I want to come back to Noreen before we go, and we maybe touched on it a little bit, but ag education for kids is a big deal to you. I believe you've been either helping with programs or starting programs. Can you tell us, we got a couple minutes left, bonus time.
Okay, so a lot of the school systems too, my neighbor actually started a farm on wheels that we go to different schools. We have school kids out, college kids. Spring and fall, we have a lot of classrooms out too to study environment, because if they're environmental sciences, it's hands-on. One time I did have the wildest kids I've ever seen in my life, and then the teacher shared with me, oh, well, they've been in detention, and this is one way we could get them on the land. So I'm like, okay, you know. So we do, in 5 years, it's been 8,000 people through the farm, and that's one-on-ones, you know, sharing. That's not just vague numbers. So it's really important, because the kids in Minneapolis especially, or even in Moorhead, some of them have no access to farms, no idea of the connections. And like Julia Child said too, how can we grow a good nation, a big nation, if your bread tastes like paper?
And with that, we'll wrap it up. That's been the Innovative Grower Panel. Thank you to Shaye, Loran, and Noreen. It is lunchtime.